Good morning, good day, and I guess technically good afternoon. This is Sean Barry. I'm one of the series organizers on the Siemens team, and I'm happy to help Larry kick off our new weekly series on design excellence. So let's get to it. Larry, can you please introduce yourself, today's topic, and what we'll be achieving throughout the series?
That sounds great. You can hear me okay, Sean? We're good to go here?
Absolutely.
All right, fantastic. So very excited about this new series, and thank you. A lot of you attended our previous series on intelligent design control. Thought it was very exciting for us to be able to share some of those topics with you. So this new series is about design excellence. How is it that we author designs? I'm going to go through a little bit of the content here in a few minutes, but I just wanted to put up a screen about me so that you have all the contact information you need to, if you need to get a hold of me. We got some LinkedIn tabs. More importantly, the Scan Me QR code. You all have already registered, or you wouldn't be here already. But anyone who wants to register for this in the future, you could just use the QR code, or just use the link from the PDF. We'll send a copy of this PDF of the presentation when this is all done. So just a little bit about me. So this is our Lunch with Larry series, and we had such tremendous success in this last section that we're going to go ahead and continue it on throughout the product lifecycle. Got some exciting things to talk about from a topical standpoint, but I just wanted to share with you the results that we got in last week's survey, and very much encourage you at the end of this webinar to do the survey again. We use this as a way to keep track of whether we're doing a good job with the presentation or not, if it's a compelling presentation, or maybe we need to make some tweaks. Last week we got the two categories that we're most interested in is learning something new and a compelling discussion. Of course, if we get good results, those are the two categories that we get the most feedback on as to positive feedback. But of course, if you have nothing you haven't heard before, we want to know that as well. So at the end, we'll do this again. Last week looked like we kind of hit on all cylinders, but the more compelling the discussion can be, the better the better the results. So we're really interested in what your feedback is. So please fill it out. All right, so one of the things I wanted to talk about right up front is we're starting a new process here at Siemens, in that what we're doing is starting a new project using an open source ventilator data set. And really what I want to be able to do in the course of this Lunch with Larry series is categorize a whole bunch of different topics, technical topics. So I'd really like this to be a technical session, not related to one discipline, but sort of cross-discipline, touching on electrical, maybe touching on software, touching on mechanical, so that we get a better sense of how does this whole process work together in medical device. And of course, to do that, we really need a data set, because what I'd like to do is tie these discussions together with a data set that's cohesive, so that as we move from one topic to another topic, we have the opportunity to talk about how that data set relates to the last topic we just talked to, or maybe a session that we had a month ago. And so one of the real problems that we've had in the past is being able to get a data set that's cohesive, that's a standard data set. And what's happened is there's several companies out there that have made their ventilator data open to the public, and as a result of that, we would like to, at Siemens, build out a cross-platform data set that allows us to really do this discussion across the entire life cycle, but also continue to enhance and enrich the data set. So if someone in the future wanted to take on that data set and build ventilators for this COVID crisis that we're dealing with, that data set would be available to them. And so that's really the goal of this. And this long-term plan is really to talk about not just a box build. So the ventilator is a box build, right? Typical. We have a bezel design, we have touch pads, we have electronics and pumps, and that's all the core of the system. But in addition to that, what we want to do is back up the process to the very to the new product creation process. Have a data set for the disposable in between the ventilator and patient. And in addition to that, we're going to have a lot of discussions in the future about actually modeling the patient data. So we're going to have some discussion about CT scans of lung data, and we're going to want to also build out our systems models in such a way as to include the patients in that system model, and then drive simulation of the system based on the model-based systems engineering discussion. And so we want the whole front end of this as well, how that drives into the requirements management as we talked about in intelligent design control. I was really a little disappointed. In our first series, we started this project right at the end of our first series, and I didn't have the opportunity to build the data into that, but we'll go back and we'll make sure that the requirements management piece of it is included as well. So this is really going to be cross-platform across our entire portfolio, and we'll be able to show you a lot of these vignettes of different aspects, how to do PCB design, and then relate it back to the systems engineering model as an example. So that's really the plan. We've already started on this, and we have a couple different use cases we're going to start with. The first one is really 3D printing related, and we're going to run from the mechanical design out to the assembly. And what I'm going to do as we go through these processes is I'll outline what the use cases are going to be, and as we enrich the data set, I'm going to make these little circles green to show you kind of where we're at as we're building it out. And so to date, what we now have is the whole server set is installed, and we've downloaded the data. So we got our 3D data built into the model now. And we're not going to talk too much about that today, but as we get into these solutions that we're working through, we'll outline what it is that is part of the data set, and to give you a better sense of kind of how we're progressing through it. So that's the first, is really related to 3D printing, combination of parts, and doing some analysis and pushing it out to production. The second one is going to be electronics related, and in a couple, I think in 3 sessions from now, we're going to have an electronics design session, and we'll use this data set as the discussion point as we move through it. So we'll do electrical schematics, PCB driven design from the schematics, and some simulation as well. So we're going to go ahead and use those data sets as we go through. So just wanted to touch on this project. We're very excited about it internally, and hopefully the data set really gives you a better sense of how to move these artifacts back and forth between production, pre-market, and also how the design authoring activities occur. So hopefully that's going to be exciting for you too. So let's go ahead and just right up front, I want to just say that this session, it's kind of necessary in design excellence to start with a discussion about what is design excellence. Give me a scope of what we're talking about here, because it is a really broad topic. We're going to talk about integration of the design creation, and of course there's lots of different topics there. We got mechanical design, electrical design, labeling design. We have software, how is it created, how's it tracked, how's it integrated. And in addition to that, we have simulation topics, and how is it that we're going to assure or increase our confidence in the design before we actually push it out to tooling. And this is really kind of an agile development discussion. How do we do agile development in the context of hardware? And also the data management piece of it, which is critically important to how we manage this project as we go through the design process, because it's really very complicated, lots of different topics to talk about. And so this is really this design authoring, design excellence thread. This is a discussion about all of these topics and how they integrate together. And so to provide us with a foundation, I really have to talk about what are all the topics, what do we mean by all these. So it's not going to be as much of a technical discussion today as much as it is a scoping discussion. So sorry, I kind of like to get down into the technical detail a little bit, but today is going to be a little bit more at the top level. So and feel free to reflect your disappointment at the survey at the end. So hopefully that's okay. So I'm going to just talk about the value now of design excellence. We really like to talk about the heartbeat of development organization. So productivity is always one of the things that we really want to stress. How is it we make our engineers productive? And in the context of design excellence, the answer to the productivity question is really excellence in tools. We want to have highly usable tools that provide the technical background and underlying feature set that gives us everything that we need to quickly execute on a design that's a conceptual design. We don't want to get stuck in the mire of the tool. And so first question and the first discussion that we want to have are, what are these world-class design tools, and what are the capabilities inside of these design tools that are necessary for us to be able to really be productive, to not get stuck in tools. The second thing is really speed. How do we increase the velocity of doing this design effort? Well, one of the problems that you have when you have these excellent design tools is as you integrate these tools together and we want to start doing collaborative design, the processes have to be set up in such a way as to move us quickly across these domains. And so that's one of the questions, is really how do we integrate these design tools together? How do we show the work that's done in one discipline to the other discipline and allow us to sort of seamlessly move down the path? The third one is really complexity management, and this is about quality. This is a highly complex topic, and I'm going to go through in the slides a few of the aspects of it. But when we set up our design processes, we want to be very careful to understand how is it exactly we're going to manage the complexity of the design, the data models, and how all these different activities relate to one another in a way that makes it easy for us to access data quickly. So we want to access the data in context. We want to have the seamless integration between these things so that as we do the searches, as we manage our design activities, it's easy for us to get from one place to another. Of course, the result of that is all design innovation. In the end, I think Peter Drucker said that companies do two things. They market, and the marketing's job is to have close association with the customer, so we understand exactly what the customer is doing and what the customer needs. But on the other side of that, we need product development to be innovative, to provide us with products that closely match what this customer needs. And so in the end, we want this to be a highly innovative system. We want to be able to identify what those customer needs and execute on that design as quickly as possible. So that's really the goal. That's what we want to get out of this system. So I'm just going to start with the productivity piece of this, and we're just going to go through some of the categories of work. And when we talk about design excellence, we at Siemens have a set of solutions that we go through. And the solutions aren't really products as much as they are processes that are required to provide the value that we believe is necessary. And the first one is really around mechanical design. So mechanical design has a variety of different topics associated with it. How do we progress the design to process work? How do we design our automation? How do we do mechanical design? So in addition to sort of simple feature models and 3D modeling, we want to be able to do surfacing. We want to be able to do sheet metal design. And we want all that design work to be integrated into the same model. And this is really what the NX product is all about. In addition to that, we have a whole bunch of capabilities that have been developed over the last maybe 5-10 years that are associated with new manufacturing processes like 3D printing. And how do we integrate then patient models, CT scans, with the vector models that are inherent in doing 3D modeling design. So the first topic, really, what big category at work, is mechanical design, and we're going to have a whole session associated with mechanical design and some of the innovation that has been made available through our products over the last several years. Next one is really electronics design, and one of the sessions that we're going to have here in this 3-part session is electrical design, where we're going to show how schematics can be authored, how those schematics get progressed to PCB design, and then how that PCB design progresses into manufacture, how we can do some simulation on the manufacture of that design. And in addition to that, we want to be able to do simulation on the construction of the PCB and manufacturability of the PCB. So there's a whole bunch of topics in and around electrical design, just like mechanical design, where we want to enhance this and sort of drag out some of the details so it's really clear not only how we author these in isolation, but now we want to do a box build, and we have an electrical design that's in the context of the mechanical design. We have a fan, and we want to do computational fluid dynamics to understand the heating of the box. We really need both these domains built into the system in a way that allows us to do the simulation of the whole set. And so that's really why we want to mix these topics, because in reality, we don't design a mechanical thing and an electrical thing and then just they live in isolation. They live together, and we want to be able to understand the performance together. That leads me to the question of simulation. And one of the real strengths of the Siemens design portfolio is our simulation portfolio. It is extremely broad and highly capable. You're going to be very impressed, I think, as we move through this process. And one of the things that our data set is really going to provide us is this cohesiveness between the mechanical design, the electrical design, and then how we're going to show the different simulation activities. And it'll all be done in context. So I'm very excited about showing you that. So integration of our simulation activities into the design activities, I think, is a critical part of how it is that we're going to give this kind of high quality experience to our designers. Just to talk through a few things here, as we start then, so, and by the way, there are more topics from a design authoring standpoint. We have labeling, how do we author artwork, and how does that artwork integrate into the design? We have software, how are we going to author the software? How do we track source code? How's the source code built into executables? And then how do we manage build and pushing those artifacts to the field? So there's a bunch of design topics in addition to the couple that I talked about, but I just wanted to be clear that at the front end of this, we're going to mix throughout these sessions, we're going to mix in design authoring topics as part of this discussion, because it's really critical to how it is that you execute your designs. So the second part is really integration. How is it we're going to integrate these tools together? And I'm just going to touch on a few topics that are going to be important to how it is that systems should be constructed. And I want to just sort of stress some of the things that you're going to run into so that none of this is a surprise. So as you construct and architect your systems, you start to think about not only the tools, but also how does this data progress through the system. So this is really about friction. This slide is just about friction. So one of the considerations that we need to have is we're not just doing these processes, we're also pushing it through change management. So as we author a design, we're going to have a certain amount of review. That review is going to get populated into a DHF. DHF is going to go through a process maybe of a phase gate review, and we're going to do ECRs and ECNs. We're going to have approvals, right? So there's a variety of different systems that we're going to have to move our design through. And one of the considerations is just simply how do we reduce the friction as we move through this process? And largely that's because we're changing between different software tools. So we'll do something in SharePoint, then we'll move over to Teamcenter, and we'll do some management of data there. Then we're moving over into another tool, and some consideration as to reducing that friction is really important to being able to increase the velocity of your system. The next thing is really related to regulatory views of the data. This slide is really just a discussion about our design history file and our device master record. One of the things that we really want to be able to do is frame our data in a way that's familiar to our regulators. And so, of course, in med device, we have this need to identify the history of the device, everything that's been changed, when it was changed, why it was changed, all the design reviews that are associated with that. And then also the device master record, which is really the recipe. How is it that we build the design? What are the work instructions? What's the bill of materials? How do we track what it was that was used, the recipe that was used to construct the product at any point in time? And of course, we also have the device history record, which is how did we build it historically, which we'll get to when we get to the manufacturing piece. But in design, these are a couple different topics that are critical to how it is that we're going to present this data to regulatory bodies. And so that's a part of the complexity that we want to figure out, right? How is it that we're going to do that? How do we progress the design into these artifacts, and how do we show them? And so we'll talk about that in a future session as well. ECAD, MCAD, I was talking about this a minute ago. Combination of your mechanical and electrical design is just absolutely critical. We want to be able to say, first of all, just does it fit, right? Do the electronics fit in the mechanical package? Does it make sense from an assembly standpoint? How do we know that the design is manufacturable? But in addition to that, we want to talk about performance. We have a chip, and the chip is heating at a certain rate. Well, then how do we know that our thermal characteristics are right? And how are we going to do our computational fluid dynamics to be sure that we don't overheat the board in the context of the use of the device based on our requirements? And so this combination of ECAD and MCAD it's really critical when we think about our data model to think in terms of having the entire data set, everything that's required to build the product in the bill of materials, right? And that way, when we're constructing the product, we have all of the tools at the ready, right? I don't need to worry about the fact that I have an electrical design in another system, and now I need to get a mechanical envelope so that I can put it into this mechanical design so I know whether I have clearance or not. We don't want to do any of that. We want to build all of the design in one environment. Next thing is really multi-CAD data management. Very commonly in large companies, due to acquisition, what ends up happening is we acquire different CAD tools. So this isn't cross-discipline, this is within a discipline. So you might be running NX as well as Solid Edge inside of our tools, but you might also have purchased a company that has SolidWorks, or it has Creo, or it has some other tool that's being used. You might have, some companies have 4 or 5 different CAD tools. And so one of the things that we want to really think about is how is it we're going to manage that data set in the context of more than one CAD platform. Very important to be able to utilize and get all this data into one environment. Next thing is really simulation data management. And as you can imagine, when we're doing development of product, we have a bill of materials that we're doing the analysis on. Well, in addition to the bill of materials for that's the product itself, in addition to that, we have a whole variety of different modeling files. So meshing models. We also have what is the current version of the tool that was being used to do the analysis work, so that we can go back and figure out at some point in time when we did this analysis, what was used to do the analysis? What were the end cases, right? What are the loading cases? What's the bill of process, right? So how is it that we're going to drive through all of the different data models historically to get back to a place where we actually understand what was done at that point in time? What tool was used? What version of the tool was used, so that we can do some debug to find out if we had a problem with the analysis, what was that problem, and how should it be corrected in the future? So simulation data management is a big part of when we get into a simulation-driven culture. How do we keep track of all that data, and how do we get back to what we did in the past? So now let's just talk a little bit about data model. So in our last session, we talked about design control and how to build out our risk analysis. And of course, the risk analysis, what it does is it informs your controls, the user needs, the system requirements, design requirements, and not only that, but what are these use errors, or what are the systems errors that can occur to create a problem with our set of controls. So there's a data set associated with product performance, right? It's really a product performance twin of how we expect our device to operate in the field, based on all the different mitigations that we have in place to handle what's going on with users. So there's a whole data set associated with that we want to track and keep and maintain the traceability of. Well, let's just take that to another level now. Very typically inside of companies, we have a device platform, and we would have a set of risk management associated with that device platform. But in addition to that, we're going to have service updates with this product in the field. And so let's say we have 2 service updates that occur progressively as time goes along. Well, that would be bad enough because now we have 3 sets historically of data that we got to keep track of. But now what happens is we find that we're going to have development efforts that are happening concurrently. So we're going to have branches of requirements where we're doing a set of work and we don't know whether we're going to merge it into the main device platform yet or not, because we're working on this update to the product based on something that's happening in the field. Well, we don't want to merge it into the device platform until we have that verification and validation data. Well, what turns out to happen is we have many of these. It's not just one project. We might have a couple different software features happening at the same time as we're doing a hardware update. And once we decide to merge it into the main platform, now we have these different validation points and the validation of data that's associated with these changes in the product in the field. So in addition to that, then we say, gosh, we have this really great platform, but we want to start a new platform, but we want to start a new platform built partially from the data set that's been built out in the original platform. And then we have integration and development activities that are happening concurrently with that second platform and maybe a third platform. So what you can see happens over time is we get a great proliferation of the design control data and how that's all related to the bill of materials. So this becomes a very complex system that you have to keep track of. Now, in addition to that, once we have all the design control data built out in those branch and merge scenarios that I just talked about, we have now the traceability from the design specifications to the engineering BOM. Now, the engineering BOM, we want that traceability because sometimes what happens in the field when we get into post-market situations where we have something identified, the information is going to be correlated back to us in the form of the bill of materials. So we'll have a lot, and we'll say that a part was built from that lot at revision B. We want to know what revision B is related to in the design control so we understand what we did to control the occurrence of that hazard situation or that harm in the field. So we really need the traceability between the design control, the performance model, what is our definition of good, to our actual authored design. Now, not uncommon that there's multiple engineering BOMs in that we have variants of the engineering BOM. So there's depth in this engineering BOM. Now what we want to do is manufacture it. So the manufactured BOM, oftentimes what happens in companies when we're in a complex development organization is that the manufactured BOM ends up being slightly different than the engineering BOM. And that's largely because, for example, manufacturing operations stock different levels of the assembly in their facility. Now that doesn't change the intent or the sort of the construction of the engineering BOM. It's just the way that the manufacturing people want to organize their business from a construction perspective, and depending upon what the line looks like and what the facility looks like, their ability to store parts, there's all kinds of things people do differently in the manufactured BOM than in the engineering BOM, and we want to have the flexibility to have multiple manufactured BOMs because we have multiple facilities and multiple lines building the same product. And then we take that manufactured BOM and we map it into the process BOM. And oftentimes we're going to have different processes. So we might have a bag seal as an example, and that bag seal, we might have 5 different facilities with 20 different bag seal machines. And we have different validation processes for doing validation of those different bag seals. Now the seal is the same, but the equipment that we're using and the process that we're using to manufacture that seal is different. And so then we also have a proliferation of that. So this is really the data management problem that we want to deal with. And so from a technical perspective, as we go through these Lunch with Larry sessions, right, we don't want to just talk about how it is that we author design, although that's critically important. And we don't want to just talk about how those activities relate to one another, but also from a data construction, a data management standpoint, how do we construct these designs in a way that allows us to walk through this entire life cycle in a seamless way? Because when we get into it, we can really get jammed up with difficulties in the data, and it doesn't have anything to do with the design. It has to do with our ability to push the design through our development and approval process. So with that being said, we're getting pretty close to the end of the half an hour, and what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about the next sessions. And so we break our design excellence into what we call solutions. And our next 3 sessions are going to be related to the orange dots here. The next one is going to be a discussion about model-based systems engineering, and we're going to use a SysML style model to break down this ventilator and get a good understanding of how to drive our systems engineering. The next one after that is going to be product performance engineering, and we're going to talk about how to progress the model-based systems model to our systems simulation model. So, and that's using our AIM-Sim product. So we're going to move to the systems simulation model. And then the last session of this section is going to be electrical design. So how do we then start authoring some of these designs? So this kind of gives you a sense of some of the topics: label design, simulation, data management, and the last set are really related to change management and data compliance issues. So hopefully you'll be interested in the topics, very interested in what you're interested in, right? So we want to hit on the topics that are most interesting to you. So any feedback you give us on, you know, the order or the things that you're most interested in seeing, we definitely want to hear back from you. So thank you so much. This is just a slide to talk about the future of this session. So we'd love for you to continue on with us through the end of the month, and I really appreciate your time today. So Sean, back to you. Thanks so much for your time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Larry. We'll kick out a follow-up email with a link to the on-demand video, as well as a PDF of Larry's presentation here today. Feel free to share both of those things, and invite your colleagues and friends and your family even if you want. Anywho, thanks everyone. Have a great week, and take care.